Start recording. There we go.
Got it. Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon to the AACG members and friends and guests. Welcome to the February
Say hi to Jan.
25th meetup with Alex Bernstein. I'm Jan Smith. I am an AACG board member and co-chair of the International Year of Glass. So, welcome to the International Year of Glass as well. So I am glad to host this, and it's my honor to be your program host today and investigate the world of Alex Bernstein's glass. I'd met Alex through being a board member on the Glass Arts Society board. Alex was just someone I gravitated to, as I know you have as well, very easily, just for his curiosity and his forthrightness and his engaging manner. So all the qualities that I admired and see that he also applies to his studio practice when I visited with my husband a few years ago. So I know many of you already have an endearing relationship with Alex and likely have works of his in your collection, or maybe would like to. So I'm looking forward to seeing more about Alex and some of the new things that he's just been working on. But before I turn it over to Alex, I just want to say there's a few house rules. Everyone's muted. However, if you do have some questions, please put them in the chat. If you have a PC, your chat bar is going to be on the lower level. And I think if you're on an iPad, it's going to be on the upper side. So Alex and I will try to monitor those questions as we go along, but we'll pretty much save the questions for the end. Thank you. And Alex, please take it away.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's a true honor, and I just saw Linda down in Florida, and I think we were talking and reminiscing that it was just about 20 years ago, the Art Alliance, I think it was a metropolitan group. Do you remember, Linda? It was one particular section of the group came and visited my studio in Cleveland, Ohio, right after graduate school. And again, that was pretty much 20 years ago. So I feel like I've grown up and become friends with all of you and feel like it's kind of like a big family. And I'm really, really thankful, and I feel grateful to have you all as friends. Obviously the support in, purchasing my work, but also just support in general and encouragement. And, with this pandemic and not being able to visit these shows, I really miss seeing everyone. And it's really about the friendships and the relationships. So I really appreciate that. And it's going to be nice to talk to you guys. My talk is set up. I've given a talk quite a few times, but was just thinking if you give the same talk over and over, it maybe loses a little bit of the passion. Because my work, I try to always change and evolve and make new work because I'm a kind of passionate person and I want to discover new ideas and see what I can make. So I changed my slide talk from what I usually give. There's you can't really change history, what I found out. So there's no changing the past, but I tried to include and mix up some different slides. So if you've seen my slide talk before, hopefully there's something new. I would like to say if you have questions, I do have the chat bar open. So I'm happy if it can be more of a conversation. I know that conversations are hard on Zoom to really chat with people, but feel free to type messages and hopefully Jan can help me keep up with them. So as we go through, if you have questions or you didn't hear something I said, or you think I'm doing a horrible job, you can put the thumbs down or something like that, but feel free to keep it, feel free to communicate. And ask questions as we go. So I'm gonna start, it's gonna be kind of chronological, older work and then newer work. I'm gonna show you some of my inspirations. And then also I was reading the little brief about this. It's supposed to be a studio tour. I don't have internet at my studio, so I took some videos. So that's something new. So I'm gonna have some videos of my process. And then if you guys are still awake or have the energy, my newest work is at the very end. So I saved the newest work for the end and some videos of that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Here's my share that. And then I'm going to. Okay. And everybody, I assume, can see this okay? So this is me at, I think probably 7 years old. And if you look closely, I am using a propane torch to actually melt glass. And I'm a parent now, and I have no idea why my parents would let me work with a 2000-degree torch. I'm horrified by this, but the fact is I don't think I really burnt myself or didn't have any problems. You may have guessed, but both my parents are glass artists, William Bernstein and Catherine Bernstein. My father was a founding member of the Glass Art Society. This is their studio kind of outside of Penland School of Crafts. So again, this is me melting glass. Not sure the exact age, but I think I was about 7. Let me see. Sorry, I'm bringing back up the chat. Okay. This is one of my mom's pieces, Catherine Bernstein. This is cast lead crystal. And this is actually a image, or she takes this from, this is a babysitter, and this is my brother. And I really like my mom's work because it's very sincere and honest, and she makes artwork about her everyday life. You know, some people make artwork about, you know, some obscure French poet, and it's kind of can be very academic, but I always like that my mom makes work about her everyday life. Okay, so now this is my father's work, William Bernstein. This is all cane drawn, so he uses a cane to draw this hot. So it may take 3, 4, 5, 8 hours to literally melt the glass into the vessel. So reheating it, draw a little bit, reheat it, draw a little bit. This is my father at Pilchuck in 1984. I think he was around 32 at this time. So it's just interesting that I'm, 15 years older than my dad was, but this is my dad at Pilchuck Glass School. Oops. And this with Paul Marioni. And I'm sure probably most of you heard of Paul Marioni, or perhaps his son, who's maybe a little bit more well-known, Dante Marioni. So Dante and I kind of grew up together, but again, this is my dad and Paul Marioni. Okay. Anybody recognize this face? So this is probably obvious. This is Dale Chihuly. My parents do this cane drawn work, and they do production, and Dale's a good friend of my dad's, and hired him to make a dozen goblets for his mother, who's now passed, but this was a commission for his mom. And Dale was at our house, and I kind of grew up around, really grew up in the studio glass movement. This is my parents' production work. As in production, where they'd get orders. They would sell this at Henry Bendel's in New York City, Saks Fifth Avenue. So they'd make lots and lots of these face goblets. And this is kind of production style where you get orders and you make multiples of things. So this is my first work. So when I first started doing glass, I thought that the way to be a professional glass artist was to make production art. So to make products. I did this and got my first orders, and then realized making the same thing over and over was really not the best situation for me. It was very difficult for me to make the same thing over. And I realized if I didn't really love what I was doing, then I probably wasn't that good at it. So this was, again, my first production. It didn't take long before I started to make one-of-a-kind art pieces. This was one of my first. My parents had a river right below their glass studio, and I'd take the river stones and then put those together with glue. So this is a vessel that I made in my dad's studio, and then stones I got from the river. This is a larger piece. This is probably about 3 feet tall, so I was expanding. I should also say, just because of time, I don't have time to show you all the pieces, but with these stone vessels, this is just a few of examples of series that I worked on for a long time. So after doing the vessels, I went to graduate school. Anybody recognize this? Anyone? Was not known for breathtaking, really groundbreaking architecture. These square buildings. This is Rochester, New York, RIT, which I was really lucky to study with Michael Taylor, Robin Cass, and then was extra lucky to study with František Janak. František Janak is a Czech glass caster that was a direct student of Professor Lebinsky. And he was a visiting professor at RIT. And so I literally worked side by side with him. I really kind of befriended him. I actually met him in Germany, in Fraunau, Germany, the year before he was coming to the US. So I already knew him. And I was able to learn the really exact methods that the Czech, Lebinsky used to do casting. At that moment, I decided that glass casting was really what I wanted to pursue. Previously, all I'd done is really blown glass. So now this was a breakthrough moment where I just decided that I wanted to do cast glass. This is one of the first pieces, and this is actually in the Corning Museum of Glass. This is called Betty's Fight. It's about one of my, a dear family friend who was struggling and lost a battle to breast cancer. So I made this piece after talking to her. She really kind of lived her life on a balance, and then the corrosion in the middle kind of signified the cancer. So it really, why do you make art? What's it about? So this gave my making process meaning to know Betty Oliver's family was really happy that her story was told through this artwork. This is called Slate. So similar to my mother and making work that was about my everyday life, there's a place outside of Rochester called, I think it was called Letchworth Park, which was the East Coast version of the Grand Canyon, where it was kind of a river running through mountains. So I went and had that experience and then came home and made this. It wasn't like that right away I made this piece, but this was inspired by my visit. So if you can kind of see the mountains and the slate and the river running through it. This is called Amber Wedge. This was my first real experience of being like a stone sculptor, but I literally cut and carved the glass sculpture. So really subtractive sculpting. Does that make sense? Or literally chipping it away and carving the sculpture. So right after graduate school, and this is where I met Linda, I was able to get a job at the Cleveland Institute of Art. My mom said, "Yay, my son got a job." She was so happy that I got a job. And it was really perfect for me right out of graduate school because it gave me a studio to work in. And it also gave me a very, very modest income, but at least enough to pay my rent and my house. It's really, really scary to, just open a studio and say, I'm going to be an artist. So this gave me the perfect kind of transition in between graduate school and then being a professional. It was really a wonderful place. Right when I went to Cleveland, I was lucky enough to get a show at Chapel Gallery. A solo show in New York City was really a big deal for me then. And it's amazing how if you have shows and you have obligations, it really keys your ability to make. So I was really in a very productive time. Around that time, I got a grant from the American Craft Council to buy optical lead crystal. So this is a sculpture I made with optical lead crystal. And again, thinking back to my mom of making work about everyday experience, I was teaching 2D and 3D design. And I was thinking about the elements in the sculpture. So in this sculpture, there's proximity, there's two pieces together, and then there's vertical lines. Can you see my pointer too, Jan? Oh, you can see the point. Okay. So there's vertical lines and horizontal lines, and then there's balance. So you see these two polished windows. So really taking what I was teaching and then working it into my artwork. This was at Habitats International, and I think it was maybe even 18 years ago. So I feel like I'm kind of just getting started, but I've had these long relationships with galleries and collectors for a long time. And it's really kind of a wonderful growing up together experience. This piece is called Rhythm. So you have a repetition of line, and with that repetition of line, you kind of a rhythm. So it's a kind of a visual rhythm. This again is optical lead crystal. And thank you, American Craft Council. If you're ever on a board of organizations that give to young artists, it very much impacts them. At least I guess I should just speak for myself. It impacted me, and it was a very modest grant for me nowadays, thinking about how much money I got. But it really just enabled me to make a whole new body of work and really expand my creativity. I put this piece in. This is actually something that I didn't used to talk about in my slide talk. Again, this piece is probably about 18 years old, but it's very similar to things I'm exploring now. So you see the lines that float up, and then there's this structure, almost this rigidness. I was really interested in the fact that glass could be rigid and structured, but yet also flow like a river. So put a bookmark on this and remember this, because it's very much related to Jack, like your piece that you were just talking about. It's the same kind of idea. And here it was 18 years ago that I first started exploring it. This piece is called Solid Empty. It was featured in New Glass Review, and I was very excited. I think it was actually even published in their book. This is a solid block of optical lead crystal. It looks like almost like a vessel, but it's actually solid on the front. So it's a block, and what you're seeing as you're looking inside. Glass has this amazing ability to have this different dimension as in having the inside. So there's the top, the bottom, and the sides, but then with glass, you can have an interior. So it was really fun to explore that. Let's see. This piece is called Stoic. It was kind of a breakthrough piece. I originally totally 100% polished this piece and made it really, really perfectly polished. It's about 2 inches thick, and it's optical lead crystal. And what happens when you polish a 2-inch thick piece of optical lead crystal and then look at it, actually, it's like a window, it disappears. So I made this sculpture. I remember it very vividly, walked outside and looked into my studio to try to see the sculpture. And I thought it fell off the pedestal because it disappeared, because it was so clear and perfect, I couldn't see it anymore. So I went back and I took my grinding wheel, like 25 grit, and ground it again. So art making is about taking chances and taking risks. And so this was a big risk. I took probably a month of my labor and undid it by regrinding it, but I really liked the effect. Does that make sense to everyone? So this was, I reground, and then all of a sudden you could see the shape and the form. And then this is looking into the interior. And so I still had that different dimension of the interior of the sculpture. This piece is called Icefall. I was really getting frustrated with the optical qualities of glass, and really was interested in following this more sculptural feeling. In Cleveland, there's called these parks that have all these waterfalls and streams. And in Cleveland, if you've lived there in the north, they're frozen for most of the year. So this piece was made about the steel mill history. So these are blocks of steel, and then the ice waterfall, which is what this is about. Then I got a job at the Worcester Center for Crafts in Worcester, Massachusetts. And when I moved there, I didn't have any kilns or really much of a studio. It was just in the point where it was being built out. So there was no kilns to melt glass. But what I did have is these little blocks of glass. They're roughly 10 by 12. And it was really a great practice because I got to work on all these shapes and forms. These are literally fabricated out of blocks. So I'd take a block and I'd carve these sculptures. My students used to joke, because I didn't really know anybody when I moved to Worcester, and they said, "Oh, I see you're making your own little friends." Because I would talk to these little sculptures and they were like my own little family. I was like, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" But it was really a good practice for me. And this is just some close-ups. I think in glass, often people want to make stuff really, really, really big, and really, really big glass, I think, is impressive. Full stop, period. Anything really big is impressive in glass. It doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be good, but the challenge is making something really, really small, really good in glass, I think. And that's my own personal challenge. I'm not speaking of any other artists or anything, but for me. So this is a tiny little piece that I think is small scale, but monumental in feel. Does that make sense? This is another angle or another view of the same sculpture. So I finally got a small little kiln. And so this is my first casting. And this is a diptych. I really liked how these sculptures talk to each other. And this is called Amber Fan. So I finally got some kilns done. So I took what I learned from the cutting and sculpting of the smaller pieces, and then was able to elaborate that on the larger castings. Everybody okay? We're doing all right? Any questions? Everybody's good? Okay, I lost the chat box. So Jan, just let me know if there's any questions so far. This is called Monocot. It's probably about 3 feet tall. And this is Bullseye Glass. If you're not familiar with the technical terms, Bullseye Glass is it's a manufacturer of glass in Portland, Oregon, where they make glass specifically for artists. And this means that I could use multi-colors. The other glass I was using, you can't mix the colors. Lonnie McGregor, the owner of Bullseye Glass, said that you should use our glass for your castings. I really like what you're doing. And I said, Lonnie, I can't afford your glass. It's too expensive. Probably a month later, a pallet of glass showed up at my studio for free. She gave me this glass. Lonnie's very, very shrewd because I've given her a lot of business for the last 15 years after she gave me that. So you can see this is multicolored. This piece is actually in the collection of the Museum of Fine Art in Boston. So again, this was Worcester. And then as nice stories go, I met a girl, Jessica Bernstein, and was able to move back to my hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. So previously I was working in academics in Cleveland and then the Worcester Center for Crafts. And then I was able to start up my own studio in Asheville, North Carolina. This is my current studio. This is kind of right when I finished renovating it, and it's not that clean. And I don't play ping pong any longer. So this is, how large was the last piece? The last piece from Bullseye is relatively small. I would say probably 24 inches by 6 by 12, but was quite heavy. So I would say probably weighed about 60 or 80 pounds. So this is a seed pod piece. Jessica, my wife, and I bought our first house, and we had a little flower garden. And our neighbor from across the street was selling bulbs to raise money for her school. And so we got these little bulbs and planted them, and these flowers grew out. And I said, wow, look, this flower grows right out of this bulb. And so I started this series from that. And this is Seed Pod series. Yes.
A minute before you move forward, there was a question about the scale of the last piece from Bullseye.
Yeah, I tried to answer that. The Bullseye piece from the last one was relatively modest scale. It was probably 24 inches tall by 6 inches deep by probably 12 or 14 wide. It had a lot of mass. It was relatively thick, so it probably weighed 60 something pounds. And it was on display at the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, but I haven't been back in a while. I'm not sure if it's up there. This piece, I'll try to say the dimensions just if people are interested. This is I think a relatively large seed pod. This is about 36 inches tall. And here's another one. And so they're about growth and movement. And then this is this window series that I did. Same kind of idea of growth and movement. So if you see, to me, the texture on the sides are almost like vines growing up the side of a piece. So, and again, like I said before, this is just a few examples. But I did this work, these window pieces for a good little while. So there's probably, I don't know, 20. I work in series where I'll make one series for a while and then work on several series at a time. Here's another example of that window series. So this is 10 years ago. So this is Alex Bernstein, our son, and this is right after he was born. Unfortunately, right after he was born, he had a major hemorrhage, a bleed in his brain, a stroke. And so was really looking like he might not make it through. And sorry to get emotional about this, but it's life. And so here's my story, because I think it really affected who I am as a person. He had to be airlifted to an academic hospital in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And so I just happened to be getting in the car to pick up Jessica. I was like, there he goes in the helicopter. It was a very surreal feeling. And thankfully, Max made it through and recovered really, really well. He's not able to walk. And so he does in the wheelchair, and I actually have videos of him in a little while, but this is, he still really, really loves the beach. And he is very functional intellectually. He's a very smart kid, and he's in 4th grade, and has an amazing memory. So he's really a wonderful kid. But as an artist, like I've talked about before, I make work about my everyday life. And so when your everyday life is a little tough, I made work that I would call a little bit more stoic and quiet. So this is a series I started right when Max was born. So you see these kind of blocks and the structure of this piece. And then like I talked about, remember the other image that I showed of the piece flowing from 18 years ago. So this was what I wanted you guys to remember. So this is the idea of these pieces can flow. So this is a relationship piece. So you see the structure and then almost like clouds floating up. So it's kind of a metaphor for a relationship and Max. This is a grouping that was put together, and put a pin on this one too, because this is something that I'll talk about later. And I owe this to Aaron Shea and Corey Hampson, who I was making these individual sculptures and had a show, I think it was for SOFA. I'm not sure if it was Corey or Aaron said, I really like these grouped together. I'm going to group them together. And sure enough, they did. And that's led to other things in my future. So stay tuned for later the talk. Howard, I see your post there, and I will talk about the Bernstein in just a little while. Howard asked about a technical question. I will have some how I make my work coming up shortly. So this is my inspiration, and I do want to say that it's loosely set for being inspired by nature. I think a lot of artists I know that are inspired by nature. So I'm going to go through the next little section are things that inspire me, and maybe not as much of me seeing something and then going back and being inspired by it, but things I see in my work. So this is a seed growing. So again, we talked about the seed. This is another version of this. This photograph is not staged. This is the sculpture actually outside in the rain, rusting. And I think it's really nice that my artwork is about nature, and it's also going through a natural phenomenon. Does that make sense? So it's literally rusting. That's why it's out in the rain. So rust is a natural phenomenon. I like the idea that this looks like grass and it looks like growth, but the patina, the rust, is actually actively rusting. I have had people ask me to seal it, and I can seal it, but I like the idea that my sculptures technically are evolving and changing for forever. This is the finished piece after the patina rust. So this is just a sunset at St. Lucia. I'm like the kind of person that's on a highway and I'll pull over and stop because I want to look at the sunset. So just the colors and mixture. No one's going to outdo Mother Nature, and I never try to, but just be inspired by what I see. So this is pieces that are inspired by the sunset. I think this was in Mexico. I think Peter just said that Max seems to like the beach, and it is true. With the pandemic, we haven't traveled as much, but we do like to go to the beach as much as possible. Max's main mode of transportation other than a wheelchair is crawling. And when he's on the beach, he can really crawl around a lot. And so we do love to go to the beach, and he loves swimming. Although with the pandemic, I think we've only done a few trips, but hopefully we're excited to start. So again, this is Mexico. This is a sunrise. So feeling the sunrise, and this, this is in my studio. I get this amazing Western light. And so to make a static sculpture, a sculpture that is a freestanding sculpture, and then all of a sudden you have this light change and move through them. I'm not saying it's like the sun rising, but it definitely, the inspiration is there for sure. Almost like this gold is just really amazing. So coral fan, this idea of growth and corals. I don't do a whole lot of scuba diving, but often people are drawn to my work that love the underwater life. And I certainly see that in my work. We can see the coral. This is the Dolomite Mountains. So a piece taken from that. Not literally, but probably inspired by the color. This is a Monet painting, and absolutely not saying that my work is anywhere near as amazing. I think this was probably done when Monet was losing his eyesight, and not quite pointillism. I don't think Monet did that, but the almost like blurriness and this beautiful kind of mystic. And these pieces, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I make my work soon. This how I make them is almost like painting. I get cups of this different, it's called frit, which is small pieces of glass, and I mix them together to try to make a landscape or try to kind of make a painting. And this to me almost looks like a picture frame and with the painting inside. So here's just a close-up detail. The same kind of color pattern. I often play with the opposite side. So this is on the back of the sculpture. This is on the front. I really like pieces to kind of talk to each other with the front and the back. Another close up. So crystals, I always as a kid was really interested in geodes, how you could have this ugly, dirty rock and then you break it open and these crystals. I kind of like to think that all in humanity, that we're all beautiful inside, I hope, and kind of like that idea of the goodness and the beauty on the inside, and again, being inspired by things that grow and change and move. So here's a crystal piece, another example. And again, I don't mean to be literal. I'm not going to try to make exactly what Mother Nature makes. I am just only inspired by it. Another, I don't remember exactly what kind of stone that is. So another crystal piece. This I had a video, actually I think I took the video out. So this very much like a geode. So and remember the pieces that have over and over, I've talked about these stacks. So the rigidness of the structure, almost like bricks. And then you can see the flow as this moves around. Really, and again, this idea of diptych, remember the clear piece I was telling you about habitats, a diptych, so two pieces together, and here again, exploring that with this sculpture. A geyser. So you can see, sometimes I like to just make a wisp or almost like a lightning bolt or just a little stripe of color in, you know, almost like this is almost underwater to me. So again, inspired by that. Here's another example. I think one more. And again, playing with each side, I think has a tension when you have points that almost look like they're coming together, or maybe they're pulling apart. The Northern Lights. So again, not necessarily inspired by it, but more like the color pattern. This is neodymium glass, which actually changes depending on what light source you have. So this piece literally changes as the sun goes down. And it really is, in my studio, I'm like, wow, look at that piece now, look at this. And this color is quite amazing. This was a happy accident, was mixing two colors together. And I got this third color that doesn't actually exist in the Bullseye Glass palette. So I was really happy with that. And you can see I've used it, same kind of color pattern. Texture in the sand. Here's another piece. To me, these are like lakes and waters. So maybe Max's love for the water, it's inspired another lake. So to me, these are, you know, it's abstract sculpture. I was a psychology major in undergrad and was really interested in perceptions and how people perceive artwork. And so to me, this is a lake and water, and this is stones on the outside, but to somebody else, it could totally be something different. And I love that. I love when people come up to me and say, that reminds me of being at my grandma's house, and you used to have this, and there was a puddle we used to splash in, so I love to hear the stories about it. So again, this was a lake. These are the Dolomite Mountains, and I showed a picture of them before on another thing. I did a cycling race in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy. And if you haven't ever been there, it's just amazing. The mountains are actually these huge stones. And to me, they're not just stones, they're actually sculptures. They look like these amazing sculptures. I've never been so taken by a landscape. I was doing a cycling race with a friend of mine on a German cycling team. So I was a visiting rider on their racing team. And this was a one-day race. I think it was 150 miles. It was a brutal event, and I was barely going to struggle through. And the whole time I kept going, wow, look at that. Wow, look at that. And my German friends like, shut up, Alex, just keep pedaling. And I was like, oh, sorry. But I'd never been that taken by a landscape. And it's really, really beautiful. And the scale of these is a little hard to see. So I came home and then I started to make things that to me were inspired by mountains and landscapes. Again, I'm not trying to make it look exactly like the Dolomites, but I was inspired by that. So here's a triptych. I really like exploring texture. And then I made a kind of a larger group. So this is a larger picture of the mountains, and then made a larger group, multicolored. And then after that, I said, well, I live in mountains called the Blue Ridge Mountains. Maybe I could make a sculpture inspired by the Blue Ridge Mountains. So I set out to do that. And this is my sculpture called Blue Ridge. This sculpture is, it's obviously abstract. So again, people can see what they see, but it probably took 6 or 8 months. Each sculpture I make is an individual sculpture, and I want it to stand alone. And then I start to place them together. And you can see the lines. To me, these lines are like rings on a tree, almost like growth lines, or they also, to me, look like clouds that are floating up and away. I showed this piece in Chicago, and there's no denying it that it looks like the Chicago skyline too. So I like the idea that it can look like multiple different things, and I like that. So there's no denying the fact that these installations could look like mountains as well as like cityscapes. Here's another one. This is a fade. So I really like that. There's actually, I think, 5 different colors of different versions of amber going all the way to gold in the middle. This is, I think, the largest installation I've done, and this is optical lead crystal. And I'm really excited. This is in the permanent collection of the Fort Wayne Museum in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm not sure if it's there installed, but we were talking about having it installed with a dark background. And I was really proud of this work. It's probably, I think, maybe 11 feet wide, and the tallest piece is maybe 36 inches tall. So it's really rewarding. Again, I think I worked on this piece for almost a year. It really, really was difficult and challenging, but it paid. This is a green group. So doing these installation pieces with multiple elements, and again, kind of landscapes. This piece is going to be living in Big Sky, Montana. And the client who bought it said that to them, it just looks like the trees in Big Sky in the summer. It's like, oh, I don't know how you got the trees in there. If you look at the bottom texture, to me, it was like a crystal that has this growth. And I was telling you about the two kind of fingers reaching together. To me, that's why I want to do the pieces, and you almost see these fingers. I want it to look like the sculpture is growing up and out. But again, here's that perspective of what people see, and their history shapes what you see in work. So they saw these as being trees and thought it looked just like the trees in Big Sky, Montana. So I think that's great, and I'm not denying it. I see that for sure. This is where I started doing, I know we're supposed to do a studio visit. So again, with the Western light, let's see if there's any sound down here. Nope, I want to turn the sound down. You don't want to hear working in my studio. So this video wasn't manipulated or anything. This is actually what my iPhone sees. And I would invite anyone to come visit my studio, especially if it's sunny in the afternoon. The light that comes into my studio is just phenomenal, and which has kind of led to, okay, I didn't want to play that again, sorry. This is what I meant. It's just amazing, and it changes every second. So this is a picture, and this again is not manipulated at all. This is the sun shining through without any other manipulation. And talk about, you have a sculpture, and it's on a shelf or it's in my studio. And then when the light hits it, to me, it changes, and it kind of engulfs you as a viewer. So I was thinking a lot about that. And this is a James Turrell installation. So I'm not comparing myself to this, who I think is a brilliant artist, but I really love the idea that as a viewer, it's not just a sculpture that's sitting there. If the light's just right, you actually can become a part of it, because the light reflects off you and glows. So I really like how other artists that have used that idea of making environments with light. I never thought as a sculptor I could use this idea of light to make an environment. So this was just a close-up detail. It's a little hard to see, but there's kind of a rainbow that shines, and this is just me holding one. So now I'm part of the art, my hand there. So this is a blue one. So this is Dan Flavin. I'm not sure, am I saying his name right, Jan? Do you know Dan Flavin? Is that right?
I think it's
I
Flavin.
think Flavin.
Okay, I knew it. I knew it was Flavin. I was like, no, not Flavin. Okay, Dan Flavin. And again, I'm not trying to compare myself to somebody that I think is a brilliant artist, but when I was teaching in Cleveland, Ohio, I brought my students to Cleveland Museum of Art, which if you haven't been there, it's phenomenal. And I remember seeing a Dan Flavin installation and having a big lecture about how it was different than other paintings. Other paintings, you can get lost and you can crawl inside of them and they're beautiful, but how this artwork, you become part of the artwork by standing in it. And it's these little seeds that I think, get dropped, and then I start to put things together. It's not like I said, oh, I want to make a Dan Flavin, or, I didn't set out to do that, but then things start to evolve. And in the picture, you can kind of see, I think he's actually looking at his hand. So it's very similar to what I was doing, looking at my hand when the light comes through. Again, this sculpture, I think is a really nice sculpture, but again, to see it come alive, this is a projection. Sorry about the picture of me there, but this is a projection of the rainbows. And again, this wasn't manipulated at all. This was just the rainbows that come off that sculpture. So it's kind of hard to describe a piece just by a picture. So here's the picture, but really when you see it with light, it really becomes more dynamic and energetic. So I really like that. And I think I have another here. This is Max, and Max is really, really into graffiti and street art and murals. And he was thrilled when he came to my studio. And this, you can watch this video. He thinks that somebody did graffiti on my floor and painted. He's trying to wipe it off. But this is actually from that piece. So these are the rainbows. And now he's looking and he sees it on his hand. And so he's wondering if that painting is actually on his hand. Oh, I didn't mean to press that again, sorry. So this is him again. Sorry, I am a dad. I like to have lots of pictures of my kid in here. Okay, so this was a different day, but again, this rainbow, and this is Max in his wheelchair. He's trying to put his hand in the rainbow, but his head's in the way. But then this is where he smashes into my sculptures and breaks everything. Almost, no, doesn't break anything. So I like to let Max have a little freedom, not quite what my parents did, allowing me to work with a 2000-degree torch when I was a kid, but I like to have Max learn respect on his own. And so I do let him have a little bit of free reign in my studio, but I was thankful that he barely bumped that and didn't damage anything. Hold on, sorry about that. I need to go, excuse me, just for a second. I lost my page. Anybody have any questions while I'm trying to get back? Okay, so the next section I'm going to talk about how I make my work. Everybody okay? Am I doing okay on time, Jan?
Could you show this? Could you show the Chicago piece again, please?
Sure.
Just in terms of timing, Alex, it's about 12:46.
Okay, I think I'm actually doing okay. I don't have a whole lot. So this again was supposed to be the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I take no offense that it actually looks a lot more like the Chicago skyline. And so this is, I mean, I've been spending a lot of energy in currently actively making these. To me, there is this sense of play. They're almost like a checkered game, chess game, where I can put the different parts together. I really like the fact that everything's movable and you can move them around. And it could be a group of 3, or it could be a group of 5, it could be a group of 10. Okay, let me get back to where I was. Okay, so I think I'm going to go into how I make next. Okay, so I was talking to you about the frit, which is small pieces of glass that's broken in. It's mostly like corn kernels. So you can see the frit here, and then this is called a billet. You are seeing my cursor, right? So you see it? Yep. Okay. So this is a billet, and a billet has what's called a low bubble content. It doesn't mean there's no bubbles at all, but it's mostly no bubbles. But what the frit does is when it melts together, it makes lots of little bubbles. And that's the geyser pieces that I showed you. That's how I did that. And that was a happy accident. I actually literally spilled some of this frit in between 2 blocks of glass, and you have this amazing pattern. So this is the pieces in the kiln. And this is a steel mold. I make mostly all my molds. out of steel. So this is steel. You can see the buckets of glass over here right after I filled them. And this is in my kiln. And then they go up to 2000 degrees. Excuse me, they go up to 1500 degrees. And then it all melts and homogenizes together. 2000 degrees is furnace glass. So excuse me. And I will be talking about furnace glass in just a second. So it melts together, homogenizes, and then a piece like this will probably be in the oven for probably 3 weeks because it has to cool really, really slowly. And then once it comes out, then I start carving and cutting it. So here's another video. Everything I do is by hand. So you can see, if you look closely, you can see a Sharpie line where I'm drawing the line for the texture I want to do. And this is the pattern that you saw before made with those billets in the frit. I couldn't find a picture of me actually sculpting. I do a lot of sculpting, like raw cutting and grinding of the piece with a diamond wheel. I had a video, I couldn't find it, but I have another one that will give you that idea. So this is after a lot of grinding and cutting. I should mention when I get to this point, sorry. Then Howard, you were asking about the Bernstein technique. When I was in graduate school, so we're gonna have to rewind a little bit, 20 something years ago, I was in my parents' studio and I was grinding steel on my father's welding table. And his furnace was off, but he had one of his finished pieces on the welding table. If you can see this metal table in this, you can see that's a welding table. So it's a metal table. And one of my dad's pieces was clear, but had been sandblasted. And when clear glass is sandblasted, it looks white. And I was grinding away this piece of metal, didn't really think much about it. And when you're grinding metal, sparks are shooting everywhere. So this is me grinding metal and sparks are shooting everywhere. I went to clean up and I realized that these sparks actually melted into my father's sculpture. So I was sweeping everything up and the ones on my father's sculpture would not come up. And I looked at it closely and they actually had melted into the glass. Any metal worker will tell you, oh yeah, I've had my coffee cup is sprayed with steel. So it is something that metal workers knew about, but I never seen anybody do this with glass. So again, this is 20 years ago at my dad's studio. I went back to graduate school. Well, I went home and I apologized to my father. I said, Dad, I'm so sorry I ruined your piece. And he said, well, you know, lessons learned. If you would have done something that you should have known better, then my dad would be mad at you. But the fact that I didn't know any better, I didn't know this would happen, he forgave me. And so I apologized, went back to grad school, took my nicest piece and literally started grinding steel on it. And you can see, let's see, this is the results. Actually, I'll show you the results in just a second. So literally grinding steel on my nicest piece. And in grad school, critiques aren't made to really be nice and kind. Critiques are made to poke holes on whatever you're doing. And usually, at least in my program, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? What's the reason for this? And critiques could be relatively brutal. And really nobody's harder on my work than I am. But in these critiques, they would often not be pretty. In the first critique that I had, when I had this fused steel, Tina Oldnow, who was a former curator of contemporary glass at the Corning Museum, was there. And Michael Rogers, who ended up teaching there, was there as a visiting professor. They were like, wow, how'd you do that? I love this. This is amazing. I had the best critique I've ever had in my life as far as being positive. People are really blown away by the fact. Nowadays, it's called Bernsteining. So fusing steel to the glass. I didn't name it that, but some of my students decided to pay respect to me by calling it Bernsteining. Anybody have any questions about this? I have, so the steel is just on the surface. So this is those same kind of half moon pieces. And this is the steel on the surface. So this is me grinding it away and cleaning it up. So grinding, it's, if I get over the line and I go too far, then I have to redo the whole thing. So I have to be really, really careful. And I'm really sensitive to make the line really, really nice. So this is grinding away, and I think I pick it up in just a second. There's one little spot I missed, and I'm pretty sure I go back and get that. But this just gives you an idea. It's almost like uncovering something. So you can see, here's the color again from the last video, but this is now the bottom's opaque. And so then, oops, I keep doing that. Sorry. And this is the finished piece. So again, going from, it doesn't want to go back. So going from this, it gets melted, it gets ground and cut and carved, and it gets the steel. I don't put steel on all my work. I don't want to do the same work over and over. So if I feel like a piece is calling for it, if I feel like it needs that, then that's what I'll do, but I don't do it on everything I do. So this is grinding it off. And then I should say that this is after about a month later of high polishing this. This is the finished piece. And I'm not sure if anybody noticed, but there was 2 pieces in the videos that I was showing. And so this was the other piece that is finished. And then let's see, this video didn't work last time. Let me see. Okay, everybody look really, really closely. See how it's gray? And now see how it's pink and kind of copper? Did you all see that? Yes, no? Okay.
Did you see the question, Alex, about how you apply the metal? If you can repeat that.
Okay. So this is patinaed. I will repeat it, but I just want to show this. So I showed you the video of a picture of a piece outside. So sometimes I'll put a piece outside to get rusted or patinaed. And sometimes if I'm in a hurry, I'll use this called copper sulfite. And it's kind of like what pickle, it's like what jewelers use. So again, this is, let's see, I'm going to do that. This is, I just sprayed the copper sulfite. The steel goes on and it looks gray. And then as you're watching, it starts to coat it with copper. And this is the copper coating. And then this is the finished piece. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So the Bernstein technique or grinding steel on the glass is I literally put the sculpture in front of the sparks and I grind the steel and the sparks onto the piece. The piece is cold, the sparks are hot. Like, what is a spark? A spark is a molten piece of steel. So that molten piece of steel actually fuses into the glass and melts. When I was doing this, I was at RIT and we would spend 1 day a week going to Corning. And when I went to Corning, I did all this research to find out if anybody had ever done this before or if it was patented. And I couldn't find any information that was that the Rockhow Library? I think I'm saying that wrong, but there's an amazing library that has everything in glass there. I used to spend hours there. And there was no record of anybody actually using this. I decided not to, try to copyright it or anything. And honestly, I feel like if I have artist friends that want to use it. If you can do something that's amazing and cool with it, I would love for other people to use it. So I tried to, instead of trying to hide my secrets, I want everybody to try it. Obviously, I wouldn't want somebody to try to make my work, but I think it gives the glass an amazing opacity to mix with the translucency of the glass. And so I also really like, this piece looks like stone, but then there's a crystal. So this idea of geodes, to me, it really, really starts looking like a geode when you have this rusty steel and these blocks on the outside. Anyway, does that make sense how I do it? I can talk to people offline about it. And there's also videos of me literally doing it and talking about it. And I was recently featured in Glass magazine where I think I go pretty in depth on how I do it as well. Oh, I forgot about that. So I remember I was saying that I didn't really have an example of me sculpting, but this is a large piece I was actually literally just working on. And you can see the floor. That's probably, I don't know, I probably 20 minutes, or 20 pounds of glass off this one sculpture. So I remove a lot of material when I'm sculpting. So very much like a stone sculptor, I carve and cut the piece. And so this is my tool of choice, which is a big grinding wheel. And again, you see the piece, you see all this glass, probably 15 or 20 pounds ground off of this. I have somebody that has a question. I think there's certainly time if somebody wants to ask a question. Are we doing okay on time? So this is the finished piece of what I was just grinding.
We do have time. We're fine.
Hi,
Okay,
Alex.
yeah.
This is
Go
Steve
ahead.
Enrick. Hi, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you doing? Nice to see you.
Good. I have a question about how you feel about a way of presenting the moon-shaped pieces that you do.
Yeah.
Has anybody hung it in a window as though it were a moon, a luminescent moon?
I've never seen it hung, but I have, this is actually pretty serendipitous that I'm on right now is a wall piece. So I have worked on having sculptures on the wall, but I've never hung a piece
'Cause I-
like. But I think it's interesting. I mean, you saw the pictures of my studio. There's no better place than natural light than having
Right.
light come through. But yes,
I'm wondering whether, I'm fantasizing whether it would be possible to use like 300-pound fish line to hang from the metal rafters in the apartment on the window that faces the rest of the beautiful skyline from our
Yeah.
apartment.
Mhm.
I wonder whether that would offend your sensibilities in any way.
Not at all. And I look at it as a collaboration. I mean, collectors and clients to me are collaborators, and I am not the kind of artist like, no, this is how it has to be. No. I understand that everybody has different opinions and different sensibilities.
It's a rumination at this point, but
I did have a collector that told me, actually speaking, it was from Bill Traver Gallery, and the collector had bought a large piece from me, and he said, we really, really love our piece. It's under our master. It's in our master bedroom under our bed. I said, wait, under your bed? And so I was a little offended. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, no, we're renovating our bedroom. So it's under the bed so it doesn't get damaged right now. I was like, oh, okay, that's okay. So I think I would not be offended in any kind of display other than, if it was, if you threw it out in the trash or something like that, I guess. So not at all. And, we feel free to reach out and I can help advise.
okay,
I
thank you.
did present for a airport once about doing a large project that was going to be hung. And there's companies that's literally all they do. They make the wires and the attachments that are rated from engineers that can handle a certain amount of weight and whatnot. But we can carry this conversation offline, so feel free to reach out after this.
Thank you.
Alex, it's 2:00 now, so I just thought I'd give you a sense of time. And
Okay, this is the last work I have, and this is probably my most recent, although the image you're looking at right now is probably about 15 years old, and it is a wall piece. So again, that serendipity, talking about different ways of displaying. I have done wall pieces, and this was done, I think, around Cleveland, because in Cleveland, I taught 2D design class, which is teaching these design elements. And so I tried to teach myself how to work with these design elements myself. And what I did is take, this isn't blown technically, but it's a hot worked. Remember I was saying 2000 degrees, so hot work piece. And then it was mounted on the wall. So here's a close up. And so this piece is, again, probably 15 or 20 years old, and it's a piece of glass that was made at the furnace. And since I do cold working, cutting and grinding like a stone sculptor, I really like the fact that I can carve and sculpt something. So when I was in grad school, I'd literally pick through the trash of other people's work so I could carve and sculpt it. And when I was in Cleveland, I had a hot shop, a glass working facility that I could use. And so if I didn't have anything from my ovens coming out, I could use the hot work that the students were using, or I could make myself stuff. So this is 15 years ago. And so flash forward to the very beginning of the pandemic, I'm looking back at this work, and so I'm re-exploring it. So this is a piece that I made, I think probably 2 years ago. Again, right before the pandemic started. And so this is kind of my newest work. This is a piece of hot work glass, and then there's a bubble in the middle. And then I think I have a video. So here's a video. Sorry about the music. So this is walking around it. To me, these pieces and making a sculpture that looks like it has movement. I'm sorry, the video was really in a hurry with that video. How can you make a sculpture that has movement and looks like it's turning and spinning and moving? That 2D, 3D design class I was telling you about before, it's something painters do, is they try to make depth or they try to make movement. This piece, I'll see if I know I'll be finished really quick, I promise. There's not much more. So as you walk around it, it actually literally looks like the sculpture is moving around, but it's just the texture inside, so the optics of the piece. So it's a very dynamic piece, although it's, monolithic, large piece. So this is a relatively small one. Here's another one. I think just the light and the optics of this piece. And this is actually on a steel base. So I was making steel bases. So instead of on the wall, I was making pedestals. And I think anybody that's going to be at the Habitat International that's coming up, I think at the end of April, is that right? I plan on showing this type work. So this is another one. This one's relatively small. Again, I would say probably 14 inches tall, probably weighs about 20 to 30 pounds. Here's another one on the side, but really it's something that you really need to walk around. This is actually literally the reflection that this piece made in the sunlight, which I thought was really cool. And this is, again, air trapped. It's a bubble. So there was air trapped inside. Here's another video. I'm sorry about this. So this is a larger one. This is about 55 pounds, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But when it's 2000 degrees on the end of a 5-foot pole, I mean, I think probably most all of y'all have seen glass blowing. You know that you have to work on this pipe. So probably with the pipe, with the glass and the glass behind the pipe called the moil, this was probably 100 pounds. So it's not easy to make. So when you're doing something that's not easy, you need a team. This is the team. This is actually at Penland School, and recently I've done some or twice at the Tacoma Museum, where I kind of rented out the whole museum. This is Greg Fiddler and Pablo Soto, which are both, I don't know if you guys have heard of them. I know Sandra Ainsley, if you're still here, you know Greg really well. So I hired these really skilled and talented people to help me make my vision. So this is a very large one. I think this is more like 60 or 80 pounds. And there you can see the bubble in here. So this is me. This kind of shows you what the scale is. This is probably about as big as I can carry. This one was about 80 pounds. So this was made at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma. So it's quite large, and I'm pretty much just solo in my studio. I do have an assistant, but it's pretty much what I can pick up and carry around. This is a video of me working on it. This is the bottom of the sculpture, but I just think the optics of this are quite interesting. So again, this is at my grinding table, and this is the foot, the bottom of the piece now that you're looking in. I almost want to display them with the base standing up. I've been around glass all my life, as you guys now know that you've suffered through this long talk, that I grew up around it. But even growing up around it, I'm still amazed at the optics and how amazing glass is. This is a video of the finished piece. So that was the bottom. And this is, if you just saw the picture of me with this 80 pounds. So this is the 80 pound largest one I've ever made. So again, I really invite everybody to come to my studio or Habitat when I show these. You really need to kind of walk around them. They really look like they're moving and glowing, and you actually can see different imagery. I keep doing that, sorry. So this is another one just to show you scale. This one's fairly large. I think this was about 25 inches tall. In the optics, so this is my arm, but it shows up in here. It's really interesting. People walk by these. I think, again, I'm talking to a crowd of people that know glass, so you're probably not that surprised, but to me, I'm always amazed by these optics. This is a relatively smaller egg, but without a bubble, and this is perfectly clear glass. So the optics, so this is actually the bottom. What you're seeing over here is actually the bottom is reflecting on the top. This is a teardrop shape. And again, actually this is a video, you can see it. So as you're walking up, see the teardrop, and then this is the bottom, and then this is the bottom again. It just keeps reflecting. So you're seeing the bottom of the piece several times, and you can kind of see the movement and the motion. Okay, and this is the last image, and I'm done. Thank you guys so much. This is actually just a close-up of the one I showed earlier. That I think this one's about 60 pounds. So now if there's any questions, I think there was a few, let's see.
There's one in the chat, but it might be a time that people might be able to unmute and ask.
How I protect the polished glass is a great question, and it's amazingly challenging, and it takes an extremely long time. And Melissa, my assistant, who came from the restaurant industry and is very methodical, was like a really high-end chef, has this methodical way. It literally, you have to tape it off with probably 6 or 8 or 10 layers of duct tape, and then you literally have to cut with a razor blade each little, see all these little textures, these have to each be cut out perfectly to make sure the steel doesn't go on the rest of the piece. And that's a great question, because it really is, it takes forever. It probably takes 2 weeks just to do that part. And I'm thankful, and I do part of them, but I'm thankful Melissa does the majority of that because I really don't have the patience. So I cut and carve and sculpt it. They, tape it off, and then it gets the steel and then removed, and then usually I polish the bottom after that. Are there any other questions? I stopped sharing now.
There is one more question that just prior to that by
Sure.
from Howard Cohen.
Wait, Howard, can you clarify what you mean about the circle ring?
Like on the pieces that are sort of pyramidal, it looks like there are either multiple pieces of glass stacked one on the other,
Oh, sure. Mhm.
or it has kind of the rings that like Peter uses in his work a lot.
This.
Right.
Yeah, so that was when I was talking about let's see, where was it? Way back 15 years ago, the structure of the glass, and to make I guess you don't need to see it again, but the piece that I was showing, here it is, this piece. So this was a piece that I think I told you I made like 15 or 20 years ago. So I was getting glass from this glass fab in Rochester, New York. So Glass Fab fabricates glass for optical uses. And I was getting their cutoffs and their pieces that they already had done. So when glass is cut, there's already a texture. So it was cut and ground, and then what I would do is stack them and then melt them together. So wherever it was cut and ground, it would leave a line. And so this is the flow line where the glass actually flowed. Does that make sense, Howard? So these are.
So you're literally taking stacks, like you said, and then melting them together to create those lines.
Yep, exactly. And that gives it this kind of flow. And like I was saying before with the installations, to me, it's like rings on a tree. And so kind of use that to have the glass have this rough, rigid structure, but also look like it's flowing like a river, because glass has that amazing quality.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Did I stop sharing now? Stop sharing. Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And feel free to come visit my studio and see the Western sunlight in person. And I really appreciate, and again, I really mean it, that it feels like I'm growing up with the family, and I appreciate everybody's support. And I'm not just talking about people that have purchased my work. Obviously, that's amazing, and I so appreciate that. But just the friendships and being able to reach out. I know Jack, we were renovating our house. I reached out to Jack. It really feels great to be able to feel like I have a big family. So I'm really happy to be part of this, and I appreciate the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass. Any other questions? Thanks, everybody. Hi, Ed.
It was a brilliant presentation. Thank you. I really